make sports talk great again with Curt Schilling and Steve Deace.
And greetings. Welcome to The Blaze. I am Steve Deace. He is Curt Schilling, future Hall of Famer, once and always World Series champion. Each weekday, we do our best here to talk sports, get to as many of the day's sports topics as we possibly can in 25 minutes. And we try to keep it to sports as much as the sports world possibly will allow. So, Curt, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go. A lot to talk about today.
There is. I had a hard time narrowing it down. Actually.
I know. I actually want to talk about the thing that we're gonna take the draft. The combine was just fascinating.
Yes, we'll get to that. To some today, but a lot of our show tomorrow will be dedicated. But let's begin today's show starting now. So Bryce Harper. I was listening to a national show yesterday, getting ready for church, and the reason why is I tuned into the Detroit sports station because I thought, with Michigan State losing Indiana, Michigan coming up against Maryland, it's a big day. That's what they would talk about. And the guy hosting the Detroit sports station wanted to talk about why he and his family members with different political views can't talk to each other about them. And I'm like, the fact that you were interrupting the Big Ten basketball title race to have this right now is why. That's why, because people would rather talk about that, frankly, okay? But so I had to tune to a national show instead, and it just so happened while I was in the shower, the guy hosting the show is a Philly guy by the name of John Kincaid. Don't know if you know him or not.
Nope.
But he says it's an open secret in Philadelphia that it was Mike Trout that talked Bryce Harper into going to the Phillies, that Trout is a lifelong, as a New Jersey resident, is a lifelong Philly sports fan. And if you do a Twitter search, by the way, you see tweets from Mike Trout urging LeBron James to go to the 76ers and other things along those lines. And that it's an open secret that it was Trout that convinced Harper to go there, structure his contract the way that we talked about last week, where it's friendly to adding another A-plus player or a couple of B-plus players, and that A-plus player in 2 years is going to be Mike Trout, and that those guys are essentially going to play the bulk of their careers together in the outfield for the Philadelphia Phillies. Are you buying that, Curt Schilling? What do you think?
Almost all of it, yes.
Wow.
Almost all, yeah.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, because it's all true. Mike Trout has been...
Well, that would be a good reason. What else you got?
Yeah, his whole life has been wrapped up in Philly sports. And it's a different kind of thing in the Northeast. You have the Red Sox, and it's a lifelong thing, and the Yankees, it's a lifelong thing, and that's not a primary factor in this, but that's very true. Number one, the part I don't believe is that Mike Trout convinced Bryce Harper to go to Philadelphia.
Okay,
all right. There were 330 million reasons, and a lot of personal reasons why I think Bryce Harper went to Philadelphia. I think this is something maybe they talked about it. And maybe it was something that...
Do players talk about this? We know they do in the NBA, where the inmates are totally running the asylum now.
Right.
We might have that might be the one league where you, as a former player rep, thinks the players have too much trouble, have too much power, maybe even. Okay. But what about in your sport, baseball? Is this open? You guys plan things out a year or two in advance?
No. I never. There's too much unpredictability. For I'm not going to, and here's the thing, I don't know how they feel about the NBA, but I'm not going to make a decision on my future based on someone who I don't know that well's family. Mm-hmm. That this is a monumental decision for people, but I think this is going to happen anyway. I've said it for about a year now. I think Mike Trout will get to free agency and will sign with the Philadelphia Phillies. This just makes it a lot nicer.
When you got introduced to Diamondbacks fans, when you went there, at your introductory press conference, did you say, I'm really looking forward to bringing a title back to Philly? Did you do that?
No.
Because apparently our man Bryce did that at his presser in Philadelphia. So he's looking forward to bringing a title back to D.C. Yikes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah.
Did he really?
Yeah. I heard that clip on CBS Sports Radio on my way in this morning.
Freudian
actually.
slip.
Yeah, that was a Freudian slip. I mean, Philly sports fans, are they really as bad as we are led to believe? Is that, or some of that urban legend?
At their worst, they're so much worse than the legend. They're
worse than the legend at the worst. The urban legend is wrong, but it's wrong because it underestimates how bad it can actually be. Okay, right. I gotcha.
We talked about this before, they literally built a jail underneath the stadium, and they still have one underneath the stadium. There's a reason why, and it's not because they think everybody's going to come and have fun. These people are, and they're. I got to tell you, there's a lot of groups that are comparable, but very few are fun or more enjoyable to play for, because they got your back. I mean, Wayne Gomes, who I love to death and is a dear friend of mine, was he was the reliever with the Phillies. He was struggling so bad that people. And I can't remember how the story came around, but they were throwing condiments on him in the bullpen in Philadelphia.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he came back to the dugout. Well, the story was that they were throwing condiments on him. Actually, we all think he was eating hot dogs, but mustard on his uniform.
Nice.
And yeah, but they want an honest day's effort, because it cost them so much to play the game or to see the game that they want the money they spend to be worth it. But I tell you what, man, there's nothing. Like I said, we're 26 years removed from the 1993 season when Joe Carter hit the walk-off home run. We had a parade after that. We lost the World Series and had a parade. Like, that's how much in love with teams they are. And I would argue that the 93 team is one of the probably 5 most remembered years ever in Philadelphia sports history.
Go back to your favorite NFL team.
No, let's not. Let's really not. Do we really have to talk about this?
I think we have the graphic. This is Antonio Brown. You know, we were asking last week if you were buying the whole exit interview with Steeler ownership, and you know, we were all chummy, and you know, everybody's all cool here. Well, Antonio Brown then promptly went on LeBron's HBO barbershop show and said, quote, "We lose the game," and he's like talking about Ben Roethlisberger, still his quarterback, because he's still on the Steeler roster. "We lose the game," and he's like, "AB should have ran a better route. He feels like he's the owner. Bro, you threw this blank to the D line. How the blank am I going to run a better route? You need to give me a better ball," unquote. This was a big topic. This line of commentary from Antonio Brown was a big topic on the NFL Network's coverage of the NFL Scouting Combine over the weekend, particularly because it broke the day that the wide receivers were doing their drills. And two guys that are the more outspoken variety at this position to ever play this position were part of the NFL Network's commentary team. Michael Irvin, Hall of Famer, Dallas Cowboys. Steve Smith will absolutely be a Hall of Famer for the Baltimore Ravens. By the way, if you want to be a smarter football fan, anytime, I used to say this when Trent Dilfer was on ESPN when you worked there, and I would say this now about Steve Smith. Whenever he's not the only one, but Steve Smith has mastered the art of
the
pulling,
wide receiver.
Yeah, the former wide receiver of pulling not Stephen A. Smith, Steve Smith, right? He has mastered the art of pulling absolutely no punches whatsoever. Okay, without being hot takey, like he adds context. He takes you inside the player's mind.
I tried as hard as I could to do that.
And he does, and he doesn't give a rip when any of his former peers play, think, or anything. Okay,
there's nothing. Steve Smith seems like the kind of guy who anything he says on the radio, he would say in person.
Yes,
and did.
And he was doubted as a player, low round draft pick, played himself into a Hall of Fame level player.
And you can be critical of athletes without calling them bad people.
Yeah, and he owes nobody in his mind anything, but he's professional about it. Like, he'll own up to it. Like, he was the Buffalo quarterback that was throwing bad routes to the receivers, and he was criticized. And he's like, you know what? The young man's just right up here. I'm going to go right up here live on the air. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to say, hey, here's how you need to throw that route. And then the young man changed to do what Steve Smith told him to do, and like connected on 8 in a row. And so Steve Smith, after ripping him, then turned around and said, now that's about as well as you can throw a football right there. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you know what I think we're really describing here is just like a man. It's just, we're not used to seeing this a lot. You know, passive aggressive is kind of how our side of species rolls nowadays.
It's somebody who's very confident and comfortable in who and what they are.
Yes.
And isn't out to be malicious, which is 90% of the media.
Right. That's what I mean by being poignant without being hot takey.
And I thought that was one of the things that I brought to baseball from a commentary perspective was I had no problem criticizing people, but I wasn't. It wasn't set up to make controversy. Anything I said on air, I would say to someone's face, and that garners respect from the players. And the fact of the matter is, when you watch for me, football is probably one of the best. When I listen to some guys like Jaworski or Gruden, the way they would break down football and talk about plays and stuff, it's just it's a craft.
Well, both Irvin and Steve Smith were not very kind to Antonio Brown. And they basically said he's hurting himself getting to where he wants to go. He's shrinking the Steelers' trade market, putting them in a position where he makes himself so toxic that they know they can't bring him back no matter what. They have a roster bonus due for him on the 17th. That's a pretty substantial hit against their cap if they keep him there. And he's shrinking the ground beneath Pittsburgh's feet and also shrinking the potential market of teams that he could go to. What's your take on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm not going to say it because I was going to say a bad word, but this is a chicken thing to do. This is.
You mean get with the owner all cozy, pose for Twitter, and then go on LeBron's show?
You don't do this. You don't do this. And it reads like someone who is lying his butt off and making an excuse, because I don't see Ben talking like this, first of all. I have no problem with Ben. I mean, I've watched Tom Brady undress guys on the sidelines. Like, as your quarterback's your leader. He's your coach on the field. And here's the thing. I don't buy it. Here's the other piece. Why is he the only guy? And if Ben Roethlisberger is a clubhouse cancer, then isn't this supposed to be multiple people? Because you remember the sports media would have you believe that there was some dysfunctional clubhouse going on in Pittsburgh last year. Mm-hmm. Well, and I try to explain this to people. This is what a dysfunctional clubhouse what the media can mean by that. One confrontation, one discussion, whatever. Excuse me. And I never heard Ben say that AB need to run better routes. I just heard him talk about the fact that
we did hear Ben criticize other receivers on the team publicly.
Yes.
Not Antonio Brown, but we did hear him criticize, like James Washington, the former All-American at Oklahoma State. He called him out by name, for example. Yeah.
Well, the difference is Brady does it to their face on the sidelines.
Yes.
There's no other way.
And you did say that you think that's perfectly fine. Doing it in the media, you are not okay with that.
No, they're not part of your family. Mm-hmm. They're not part of the group. In fact, they're rooting for you to do stuff like this, because this makes a lazy media lazier.
What is it about this position? He's not the only guy. What is it about defensive backs and receivers in this league that they just seem to put their personalities when almost every time there's a problem? Well, 9 times out of 10, it's a guy playing receiver or DB. Why?
I can give you the wide receivers very simply. You've got 4 wide receivers who in their mind are all the number 1 running back. Mm-hmm. That's just it. Every one of them thinks if you get them the ball, you're going to win, and you can only throw one ball per pass, right? So you've got your number 1, and Keyshawn Johnson to me was the first guy that ever really did anything like this.
Give me the damn ball routine, yeah.
And I never thought he was good enough to be that guy anyway.
If there was a hall of pretty good, he'd be in it.
Yeah,
but that's what he was, pretty good.
Yeah, and But the fact of the matter is, you've got 4 guys, 4 alpha males, who are as competitive as hell. All that's great, but selfish. And the thing about it is, let me give you an example of what it means to be a receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. Rob Gronkowski, or I'm trying to think of the last guy they had, the last big name for you. Anyway, when you come to the Patriots, you might spend 4 quarters being a decoy and getting 2 passes. Mm-hmm. And not saying a word about it after the game, because that's what you needed to do to get a Super Bowl trophy. This is a guy who's more worried about the petty crap than he is the Super Bowl trophy. That doesn't mean he's not a Hall of Fame player.
Now he would say, I was like that this year because we lost Le'Veon Bell, didn't come to camp. We didn't make the playoffs. We were losing games. Someone needed to step forward, and I led the league in touchdown receptions last season. So I'm trying to be the leader, and I was the symptom of what went wrong, not the cause.
But again, that's BS, because what he did is anti-leader in every possible way.
You think it's a bad idea getting in a fight with your quarterback the week before the last game of the season when you have to win to get into playoffs, but you get suspended? You think that's bad?
No, I don't think it's bad at all. What I think is bad is that anybody outside of you two and your teammates knows about it. Steve, I had physical confrontations with people.
So you think the Steelers were wrong to suspend him because that's what made it a public story, was suspending him?
But if there's somebody who you might – here's the thing. Remember when I told you about Manny? Manny was a guy who, when he wanted to play, it didn't matter. But there were times when he didn't want to play. And I always argue, and you know this, it's true in almost every case, your weakest link in a 25-man roster will break at the worst possible time. I think that they thought he might just half-ass it, which is mind-boggling to me.
Meaning go out there and pout.
I think,
and we've seen that. There was a guy, the first year the Lions made the playoffs with Matthew Stafford, and they had, Nate Burleson, who's now on the NFL Network, and Calvin Johnson in the prime of his career, who's going to the Hall of Fame, and they had this third receiver in the slot, Titus Young, who was a really good player, and he would pout about not getting the ball, and so he actually at the end of the year went out there and purposely lined up wrong and ran wrong routes, just to prove a point.
That's not even the worst. The worst transgression for me is that guy who, the second the snap happens, he's not getting the ball. That guy who
because he half-asses the route, and so yeah. And
so you now have 11 defenders against 10 offensive players.
What's funny about this is the best player, I think, there's not even a debate. The best athlete to ever play this position heading into the 100 years of this league, who I could argue right there with a Lawrence Taylor kind of best player ever, regardless of position you played, because of just how you dominated and revolutionized the game, was Jerry Rice, and he never said a damn word to anybody. Nope. He just embarrassed you for 16 Sundays a year.
The NFL is a very dangerous thing for lazy players because of game film. And you can see it all now, but I would argue that yes, Jerry Rice, and I think the same thing of Michael Jordan when I think of the NBA. I don't think you'll ever see highlights of him not playing a full court game ever, half-assing down to that kind of thing. And this is the kind of guy who it's very clear that, again, why do you think the Patriots have 6 Super Bowls? They don't
put up with any of this.
They would rather have a guy be what's his name, the receiver this year that they had. They got
you were talking which one, in the slot, the outside, which one?
The guy that got suspended.
Josh Gordon.
Yeah. They will take a chance on a Josh Gordon who has a severe addiction problem over something like this, because this is more dangerous to the club than that.
No doubt. All right, speaking of football, there is a bill that's been proposed in your home state of Massachusetts, which would make it illegal in the state for anybody to play tackle football, organized activities, until after the 7th grade. Interest of full disclosure, we have, because Mom asked, our son Noah wanted to play tackle football this year in the 6th grade. Mom asked that. Now, he's also, just so you know, he was a crisis pregnancy. He literally fit into the palm of my hand when he was delivered versus emergency C-section. He had to live the first week plus of his life in a NICU. He couldn't breathe or anything on his own. Okay, so he's a little on the smaller. He's just now catching up to his age group, and he just turned 12. Okay, so Mom asked, given those things, if we could wait until he exhausted his eligibility in flag football before he went and played tackle football. And we got together and decided we would, when Mama is happy, everybody's happy. So we did that in our home this past fall. But now he's heading into the 7th grade, and he's aged out of flag football, and he'll play regular football next fall. But this bill, what are your thoughts on it? Is this something government should step in? Because if it's really about concussions, why aren't we telling girls they can't play soccer until after the 7th grade? Because that per capita causes more concussions than any other youth sport, including football.
And it is about concussions, but they just don't. The government doesn't understand or know how to handle these things. This is why you don't trust them to intrude on our lives any more than they need to. The only reason I like this is because of what I've learned and seen and heard and talked about CTE. I just, the fact of the matter is, when people talk about, I now know there is no level or degree of concussion that's okay, right? And you're talking about kids. Here's why it's more dangerous, I think, almost than the NFL, in the sense They don't know how to hit yet. They don't know how to tackle. Many of them don't know how to fall, how to get hit, and all the things that go with that. I hate government intrusion in our private lives. I wish we did this on our own, Steve. I wish we did.
Your kids play hockey. Why is that any less dangerous?
It's not. It's not. It's a personal thing. My son's a goalie. And
I said that, hey, we made this personal decision. See, because here's why I hate this legislation. Because, see, I don't think it's about concussions. I don't. I think all of this is about how do we rein in one of the final remaining masculine meritocracies acceptable in American culture. Because if this was about concussions, we'd be banning girls playing soccer, banning header plays. No, we wouldn't,
because think about this, Steve. The government does what they do based on public opinion, period. There's no cry for women's soccer CTE studies.
Oh, I'm not so sure about that, Curt. I think the government, which government. I think government does plenty to try and shape public opinion as well.
Absolutely.
And the reason why public opinion has nothing to say about girls soccer is because, again, this isn't about football safety. This is about quashing and squashing one of the last remaining masculine meritocracies left in the culture. Because the same people, Christine Brennan in the pages of USA Today, crying about, I don't want to use the Redskins name, and how unsafe football is totally fine with your daughters being drafted to go get gang raped by Islamic jihadists on the front line of a war. Okay? Yeah. This isn't about safety. Okay? This is about, I don't like masculine meritocracies. That's what this is about.
That's fair.
And because that's why you don't hear about the girls' soccer concussion rate, because that's acceptable because, we're a matriarchal culture now. So those are acceptable injuries. All right. We don't talk about those. But we're going to talk about football so we can rein in masculinity. That's what it's about.
The same argument. Why aren't they getting rid of contact hockey? Until a certain age, because
hockey is not nearly as popular of a masculine meritocracy as football. It's not even close. Not even close. That's why. Yeah. Because again, you're making the argument for me. If it was about concussions, we'd be doing this with hockey. We'd be doing this with girls soccer. We're not. We're targeting football for a reason. That's why we're doing it. Okay, because of what football represents. I'm reminded of something I think it was MacArthur said this actually, that the secret to America's military success was football, because it's the closest thing that teaches
the combat,
the sort of combat and camaraderie balance of those two things that is required of a successful unit. Okay, football is the closest thing any culture has ever created. Okay,
which is why. Major General Tom Hammond, who was the commanding general of the 4th Infantry Division, when I was visiting in the Middle East, his entire office had a football paraphernalia in it. And it wasn't, and like he had the 4th ID football helmet. I mean, and we talked about the fact that is such an incredibly good experience for them to bring athletes in like that, because they understand the culture of the clubhouse. And that's the military is the only place that's got probably a dirtier clubhouse than sports.
Let's get to the court storming debate. Another debate that I think is for absolute manginas. Okay, but I understand when your culture is in steep decline, sometimes you just can't have nice things. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this debate over court storming erupted again over the weekend in college basketball, particularly with the Nevada-Utah State game. It's a rivalry out there in the Mountain West, and Nevada's a nationally ranked team. Utah State needed a signature win to get themselves off the NCAA tournament bubble, and Nevada has been a top 10 team in the AP poll most of the year, and Utah State got a big win. So some backstory here. Apparently one of the Utah State players, as they were going through the handshake line at the end, said F you to every one of the Nevada people that he walked across. The fans are storming the court. There's security altercations. I think we have some video. So for those of you watching, listening on the podcast, which you can't see, is this went out on the court with this court storming, spilled out into the hallway. Afterwards, one of the Nevada players ends up punching a fire extinguisher, which I think that's like a serious misdemeanor or something along those lines. So this has brought back the whole debate over court storming. Now you're in a sport where, if you go back and watch the old, when Howard Cosell and Keith Jackson were doing Major League Baseball postseason games in the 70s on ABC, fans stormed Yankee Stadium or Dodger Stadium when the team won, right? The famous clip of Hank Aaron getting 715 routine and people coming out of the stands to run the bases with him. So you're in a sport where somewhere in the 80s, they got rid of a lot of that stuff. Okay, probably about the time you were coming in and put all the security there, so that can't happen anymore. So your view on court storming in college basketball, is this a worth? Do you have an opinion, or do you think there's 75 other things we ought to be debating right now?
There's 75 other things, but this has, in my opinion, nothing to do with anything but money. The fact that we're now talking about this is going to mean that someone's going to get seriously injured in one of these, and the school's going to get sued for hundreds of millions of dollars for not protecting the safety of the students. That's it. All this is.
You ever been in a field storming, a fan storming the field incident? You ever been involved in that as a player?
Yeah, yes, I have.
What was it like as a player?
It's nerve-wracking.
Because I have been involved in it too.
People are trying to steal, like, clothing, like rip your hat off, and most of them, well, think about it. So stand on the mound and imagine 60,000 drunk people running in your direction. That's what, I mean, it's kind of like the charge of the light brigade in many ways.
I've mentioned before in one of my former lives, I was really close to the Iowa State football program, and Dan McCartney was the coach there, and I'd often get sideline passes. And when they beat Nebraska in 2002, it was like the first time they had beaten them since like 1977. And I'm right down there on the field, and the entire student section of Jack Trice, about, it seats 50,000, maybe a third of that is the student section. But when they all pour out there all at once, I can't explain it to you, but it was a little bit like, being on that scary roller coaster that's both frightening and exhilarating at the exact same time, But then like that, it was gone. It lasted for 5 seconds, and then the people spread out and did their thing.
I realized later it was the lack of control. You have no control over things.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen people get trampled and all the other things. It's just that unpredictability. Remember
I also weighed like 380 pounds at this time, so I wasn't moving.
Hey, okay? I was like Carlton Fisk when he hit the walk-off in 75 after he crossed home plate, and he was just steamrolling people to get to the dugout. That's what I was doing.
All right, tomorrow, a ton on the NFL Combine and some fascinating subplots, including the very top of the draft with your childhood favorite team, the Arizona Cardinals. We'll be talking about that here tomorrow on the show. We'll see you then, Curt.
All right, buddy.
Take care.